All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. It's noon. So, welcome to the inaugural Open Canopy webinar. We're excited to have Laura Calandrella, Executive Director of Keeping Forests, with us today to talk about the role of economics in scaling up woodland restoration on private lands. Just as a quick refresher, the goal of Open Canopy, broadly speaking, is just to continue to push the need for active forest management and restoration and maintenance of our declining open forests, specifically woodlands and savannas, to the forefront of the conservation community. They represent a huge amount of biodiversity, economic opportunity, structural diversity, all the above, and we just want to make sure that they are getting what we think is the due attention that they should be. The next thing, these webinars will be held on the first Fridays of February, May, August, and November, most likely at noon Eastern. And our first one will be on our second one will be on February 6th, 2025. So we'll be sending out more information on that, at least a month ahead of time, hopefully more than that. And so for the first two topics of the Open Canopy webinar series, we wanted to address a couple of things that we did not address adequately enough at the workshop. And the first one of those is economics, because economics plays a huge role in the ability of landowners to conduct restoration and management of their forests. And so we're doing that today. Laura Calandrella is going to address economics, and we're excited to hear from her. The second topic we really want to hit on that we didn't have enough of at the workshop was we want to talk about open canopy management of working forests that are need revenue, need to turn a profit, and that their goal is not just conservation or recreation. They are actual working forests. So we're hoping to have that topic for our second webinar coming up in February. And if anyone has ideas for webinar topics, please send them to us, and we are happy to look into finding some good speakers to cover anything that you think we need to address. I think probably the next thing I should mention is we are brand new to conducting webinars, especially on Zoom. So we'll probably screw something up. I'll probably screw something up. So please be patient with us. We'll get it figured out, and we'll have a good time here today. In terms of questions, we are handling all questions via the Q&A box there. So please put your questions there. And we've also enabled people to upvote questions that they also want to hear answered. So we'll probably have limited time at the end. So we'll be looking to see which questions the most people want to have answered. So please be sure to participate in that and upvote the questions that you think are the most important. Finally, before we introduce and turn it over to Laura, I'm going to share my screen real quickly and talk about an Open Canopy project reporting form that Jordan and RD put together for us. I believe you should be able to see this now. And, one of the things we talked about at Open Canopy is obviously we didn't have a workshop just to have a workshop. That's pointless. We had a workshop to empower more people to do more actual active management and implement more open canopy management on their lands and any lands that they have the ability to manage. So to that end, we wanted to be able to provide an opportunity for people to report where they're doing open canopy management and what they're doing. It's totally voluntary, obviously, but it'll basically help us to know what's going on where, how much is happening, and to really identify new areas to prioritize for future open canopy management. So if you're willing, we'd love, please do report the forest stand improvement or timber stand improvement, however you want to look at it. Anything you're doing to actively manage open canopy forest, please report that in this form. We're not going to ask for any personally identifiable information. If it's private lands, that's all completely confidential. I don't even believe we asked for it. But please do fill this out. We'd love to see what is going on and where and use this as a tool to further open canopy management. With that, today's webinar. We are super excited to have Laura Calandrella with us today. Laura Calandrella is the Executive Director of Keeping Forest. It's a coalition advancing market-based conservation across the U.S. South. Keeping Forest focuses on creating investable pathways for private landowners by catalyzing products for low-value wood and building an investment framework payment for ecosystem services pilots, especially water. So Keeping Forest partners with federal and state government, NGOs, corporations, and foundations to bring new forest product innovations to life that ultimately create the revenue for landowners to scale woodland restoration and regeneration and keep their forests as forests. So Laura, I'll turn it over to you and look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Great. Thank you so much, Kyle. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I am sorry that I missed you all at the meeting in Kentucky. Was supposed to be there, but this means I get a little bit more time with you. And so I'm going to, like Kyle said, we have a few new things going on. Can someone, one of the panelists, just confirm that you can see my screen?
Perfect.
Okay, awesome. Great. So Kyle gave you sort of a mouthful about what Keeping Forest is, and I'll explain over the course of the next 30, 40 minutes or so more about our work. But as he mentioned, we're nonprofit. We are a collaboration that spans many different types of stakeholders. We don't necessarily work with landowners directly. Really, we came together as organizations from multiple sectors that were concerned about the loss of forests in the South, but all with very different viewpoints and different values of why we were concerned about the loss of forests in the South. And so American Bird Conservancy, I don't know if you can see the Luce, my dog, who's joined us. I'm not sure if you can see her. She just popped into the screen. American Bird Conservancy and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service were two major voices at the very beginning of our initiative, really focused on not just on bird diversity for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but certainly American Bird Conservancy has been a partner for us because of the importance, the value of biodiversity, the value of habitat specifically for birds. So I just want to open up and share a little bit about what that partnership looks like. And when Keeping Forest talks about the importance of working forests and the importance of markets, we always try to connect on the values that others care about. And one of those is birds.
So for me, forests are a necessity. You know, the obvious part is they produce air. And of course, we also know that having forests on the land gives us good water quality. I think some of the more subtle things that I have to have are the birds. The southeastern forests are particularly special because in addition to being a really important place for birds to breed, a lot of birds that breed further north spend the winter in southern forests. So for me, forests are kind of a necessity for what makes me happy. I have to have birds and birds have to have forests. So one of the most inspiring things I get to do is spend some time in the forest with private landowners. And I'm just always amazed at how important their forests are to them and just the care that they give the land that they steward. And so when I get to spend time with a landowner, I get to talk about the birds. They're managing their forest. They're thinking really carefully about what their forest management means for the trees and for water, for air quality. And we'll walk around and talk about all the birds that are using the forest. And sometimes, depending on where we are, it could be 20, 30 species. When we finish walking around together one morning, a landowner will turn to me and say, I had no idea my forest provided a place for all those birds. And they're so proud with what they can do, you know, for themselves, for families, for people that need forest products. But then they're also really proud about the birds that use their forests. The landowners take care of their forests and are thoughtful about their management decisions. It results in habitat conditions that support birds. Hi, I'm E.J. Williams with American Bird Conservancy, and we're working hard to keep forests as forests.
So this is just one way that Keeping Forest likes to talk about working forests. You're sort of getting a 2-for-1 today because I am going to be talking about markets, but I'm talking about markets specifically for working forests and also just really making sure that all of the different values are represented, including canopy, including biodiversity. So these are NASA maps. I'm going to put a few NASA maps up here. So obviously what you're looking at right now, maybe not so obviously that legend is not very big, but this is a dynamic habitat index, and it's showing here what I want you to pay attention to and why we're Keeping Forest is specifically focused on the Southeast is that the Southeast combines uniquely high canopy and light absorbance with high minimum cover. So what that means in the Southeast is that we're able to maintain an open functional canopy structure year round. And so if we lose these forests, we're also losing the conditions that support thousands of species. I also want you to notice another national map. It's just looking at the density. What you're seeing here are the productive forests in the United States. And so again, what we're seeing is that the Southeast is an extremely productive forest. You see high seasonality, right? So not only are we, as EJ mentioned in the video, not only do we have a lot of endemic species, but we are also, the canopy there is very, very important for migrating species. And that canopy is because of our private landowners. Our private landowners play a critical role in the future of our forests, especially in the South. So when we talk about the South, I'll show you in a moment the map that Keeping Forest covers, the 13 states that we cover. But in the Southeast, 86% of our forests are owned by private landowners. And of that 86%, the majority of those landowners are family landowners, small landowners. So it is a lot of different people making a lot of different decisions, not just about the management of their land, but about whether they keep their land, hence Keeping Forests as forests. There's 245 million acres of forest in the South, and we are on pace to lose 23 million acres of that by 2060. So just for a moment to put that in perspective, you could fill 19 Grand Canyons with forests. And so what does that mean? What for the canopy, what does that mean for the things that you all care about? So I do want to share, I'm going to jump back into videos. I'm trying to break this up so you're not just listening to me talk the whole time. The next up, it gives you a little bit broader perspective on the problem statement that we're trying to solve and who Keeping Forests is.
If the U.S. South continues to develop at its current rate, our forests and the benefits they provide will pay the price. Urbanization and land use change data shows that 23 million acres of southern forests are facing immense pressure for development. Keeping Forests brings together a diverse coalition of scientists, forest advocates, conservation experts, and business leaders to develop innovative market-based approaches to support private landowners who are actively managing over 86% of the region's 245 million acres of timberlands. Our goal is simple. By illuminating the economic and environmental benefits that southern forests provide, and by increasing the value of privately owned forests, we are empowering the next generation of landowners, conservationists, consumers, and citizens to keep forests as forests.
And so this work that Keeping Forests began in 2016 really came out of research that had been done by the U.S. Forest Service, and the U.S. Forest Service and an entity called the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities brought together this group of stakeholders to really try to hone in on what's the one thing that a multi-stakeholder group could actually work together on to make an impact. And timber markets, we were seeing a decline. The Southern Forest Futures Report was the 2012 version of a report that comes out every 10 years from the Forest Service Southern Research Station, and really looking at what are we projecting for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And timber prices, urbanization, land use change, all of that was what we were seeing, but particularly with timber prices. Fast forward to 2025, Southern Forest Outlook is telling us the same thing. We're still seeing a decline in markets. In the South, we've had a rash of closure of mills, right? So it's not just about finding markets for timber, but also what are some other profitable outlets that landowners can have. What's really interesting is that Keeping Forest, we started as a coalition in 2016. We just got our NGO status this year. Hooray. I'm excited about that, to be an official organization. But this year, markets have been on everybody's lips. The administration is really, really focused on markets for rural landowners, markets for agriculture, and timber markets in particular. So it's not just that the research is showing us policy is changing to really take a look at this, but we've been working on this problem statement now for 10 years. In that 10 years, we have learned a lot, and I'm going to share some of that with you today. Just a few of our partners. This is a beautiful mass timber building at Clemson University. And just some of the organizations. This is not a full list of partners that we have worked with, but just a list of some organizations that you might recognize. So how are we promoting, expanding, and catalyzing markets for forests? We went through a pretty exhaustive, what is called a systems mapping exercise. So we took for over a year, or during the course of a year, rather, we gathered these partners together to look at all of the inputs, outputs, and interrelationships between the ecological, economic, social, and political factors affecting forest ownership in the Southeast. And through that year process, so if you can kind of imagine a map with lots of arrows, we always called it the spaghetti map. But through that process, we were able to identify the 3 strategies that we felt could best create the enabling conditions that would allow us to keep forests as forests. Not surprisingly, markets was a huge focus. So two of our initiatives are very, very specifically market driven. And the last one, which is our Forest Champions and Leaders, is really about aligning leadership, aligning different voices, like voices from American Bird Conservancy with working forests, right? Or like you'll see another video I show later, like White Oak Initiative and Buffalo Trace. So really talking to people about forests and working forests in different ways. But the 2 market approaches, our emerging markets and our Southern Forest Products markets, those are very, very, very narrowly focused on market creation and market expansion. So emerging markets, what we're doing there is we are trying to create a new market that is compensating landowners for the benefits that their water provide, or that their forests provide to water quality and quantity. And our Southern Forest Products, we're really focusing on new product innovation, particularly for low value wood. And I already explained what our Forest Champions and Leaders. So I'll share a little bit about where we're at with emerging markets and really trying to position forests as critical infrastructure. The very first meeting of Keeping Forests in 2016, Larry Seltzer, who's the CEO of the Conservation Fund, gave the keynote. And in that very first meeting, that was sort of the rally cry to action, is we need to start thinking about our forests as infrastructure in the same way that we think about physical infrastructure. What Keeping Forests has, as we dove into, we started around 2019, trying to understand, is there an opportunity to create a forest water investment model, essentially. And what we have learned, and this is just sort of recent learning in the last year, after much research, social science as well as hard science, working with researchers at NC State, Southern Research Station, working with environmental psychologists and running several pilot projects, is that the best investment mechanism that we see right now, and the fastest investment mechanism that we see right now, is through corporate investment and potentially public-private partnerships. But what we're seeing is a lot of in the South in particular, we're seeing a lot of data centers come in, which are not only impacting communities, but impacting the water draw that they have. And there's a lot of energy that's being stood up in the Southeast. And so there's an opportunity there too for water users, but even for corporations that aren't heavy water users, just trying to understand what would help them to invest. And so the way that we look at this is, and the model that we're building, so Keeping Forest doesn't ever intend to run projects into perpetuity. Sort of think of us like the think tank arm or sort of like the venture arm. We're trying to prove that a model works so that the marketplace can pick it up and it runs, right? So what we're trying to do, we're taking the risk to and taking the time to really figure out what works and create something that can be replicated and scaled across the Southeast. And there's nothing to say that this couldn't be replicated or scaled across the United States as well. So the tools that we're creating right now and the framework that we're looking at is, how do we decide what forests are going to be high return investments for corporate needs? So we're trying to create a database, of pretty easy to use database for corporations or for any kind of buyer of an ecosystem service, to be able to say, okay, yes, I'm going to get, this is the outcome that I want, and I'm going to get the highest return here. So we're building that tool. We're actually building the platform, and the platform is sort of the investment pathway as well as the valuation. So if you think of, let's just say Airbnb or Uber, they took what were underutilized or unused assets, cars, houses, and they built the platform that has behind it the decision support tools for valuation, right? That then make it really, really easy for you to go in and decide where you would, call a car to your house or go decide where you're going to stay. So that's a big piece of what we're doing. It is not an easy piece of what we're doing, but we are, through the decision support tools, through social science, working with partners and really trying to understand like the simplest way for this third verification and transparency piece of the framework as well. We're trying to understand where are there already, for example, FSC certifications that corporations might be interested in, or SFI verifications that they are already interested in. How do we build that into this platform so that it's easy, it's transparent, you trust it, the platform itself is doing the work to create this market. And then on the landowner side, we'll work with landowner groups. For example, in South Carolina, we worked with the South Carolina Forestry Commission and several partners, Longleaf Alliance, Upstate Forever, Sustain SC, to really understand how do we get the landowners engaged. And so there, we did a lot of outreach to landowner associations, and really what we started to understand is landowners don't need something new. If they're going to participate in this platform, we have to already tap into the engaged, established groups. Those groups are already trusted by these landowners. We originally thought that it was going to be utilities that would be the solution for investments. That's the most common water market out there, is that there's a voluntary fee that is added onto your water bill, for example, and that goes then to land management practices. For a host of reasons, that's a whole other webinar. We can talk about why that's not the pathway forward, but I'll just say in the Southeast anyway, if we think about things being replicable and scalable across the Southeast, there are not enough people there are a lot of people on well water, I guess I should say, is the better way to say that. And so we can't scale that to reach the number of landowners that we need. And so we did find some really early interest from corporations. So that's the direction that we're going now. And then it's also not about just the solution. So I'm in 3 or 4 minutes, I'm explaining something that has taken us 6 years and 3 different pilot sites to figure out. And it's not an easy thing to explain. I'm getting better over time at finding the right metaphors for people, but it doesn't matter if the landowner doesn't trust me, or if a corporation doesn't trust me, this solution is not going to succeed. So we're really looking at, even though that we want to replicate and scale this, we need to understand who are those local leaders and that can fill the gaps and actually be the ones presenting the solutions, whether it is to corporations or to landowners. And the goal here with this is, once we have this all figured out, platform included, is essentially to create a playbook so that anybody that was interested in establishing a water market would be able to pull from this playbook. So Southern Forest Products, excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of water. So here, Again, we are really focused on how do we think about branding the South. So this is interesting, right? There's a lot of different products that come out of southern forests, and there's a lot of material that isn't used currently that could help to, for example, you see in this picture, medicine comes from our forests. We have sustainable aviation fuel that comes from our forests. We have bourbon that comes from our forests, and some of these are higher value products, right? Some of them are lower value products. And so, what our goal is with this idea of branding the South is to really start to shift thinking around sourcing from the South. We can start to position things. So we're not trying to create another certification, and this isn't just branding like marketing, but it's actually starting to shift the economic engine that then drives investment into the South. So there's a lot of how I like to explain this one is, and I wish I could see you all because I like to play a game with the audience, but it's just like you think of when somebody says, okay, where is the best wine in the world? You might say France, or you might say Napa Valley, right? France and Champagne, Haas avocados, and that's an agricultural marketing service check off program, the avocado one. But what we can do, we can use these examples where taking things that are just sort of seen as commodities and really shifting them into a higher dollar product, either by having new product innovation or by creating some sort of organizing principle that consumers are going to put downward pressure on whoever it is that is selling these things. So really bypassing the bottleneck of who's buying and selling, and so that we can start to see more effort put into the South. We are not intending to build the full supply chain, and there's a lot of supply chain issues that make for a strong geographic brand. If you're going to do something like brand a commodity, the whole supply chain needs to be really intact. But the idea is over time that our work helps to drive those supply chain investments. And then lastly, I mentioned forest champions and leaders, really getting leaders, activating a network of leaders who have trusted constituencies like EJ, like American Bird Conservancy. So that was one of our forest champions and leaders videos, who can speak for the forest. And they speak for working forests in a different way. So we're enlisting brands, builders, storytellers. I actually was on a phone call this morning, and we're hopefully partnering not with FIFA itself, but on the World Cup, because the World Cup will be in Atlanta. So we're actually working to get a story, hopefully, we're hoping it's the Atlanta airport. I keep saying hopefully because there's several different locations, but the idea is that as the world arrives to the South, that we get to tell the story of working for us and all of the values that they provide, and connect that to soccer fans, essentially. So I'm going to wrap up now by showing you a little bit of an extended video of what we've put together in a direction that we're heading, and you might recognize some of these people in this video as well.
I get that question a lot. What contributes the most to the flavor profile of bourbon? And I would say the barrel. Because a lot of these barrels that we're using today were seedlings 60 to 80 years ago. I think we've said before, we need the state of Rhode Island to be planted in white oak in order for us to make sure we have the white oaks that are sustainable for our products.
I'm Scott Taylor. I'm a co-owner of Elk Cave Farm with my brother Steve. We've got about 1,350 acres of hardwood timberland in central Kentucky. Parts of this farm have been in our family for 6 generations. You got to have a long-term commitment to something like this.
We're really focused on providing very high quality hardwood. That's everything from the stave logs that go into barrels for our distilling industry, other high quality veneer logs that go into specialty markets, all the way through saw timber, all the way down to the pallet and tie logs. So we focus pretty hard on forest management. We know that we have an obligation to make sure that that's a sustainable supply. of forest products. So we're focused very heavily working with our consulting foresters and other professionals on how we manage that, how we regenerate it to make sure that we have a supply for future generations.
White oak doesn't grow very fast. So when you're thinking about managing it and having it for the future, we're thinking about what's going to happen 80 or 100 years from now. Those working forests are family owned, and we have to be able to advise them on practices they could do that make sense with their scale and with their other objectives, because most of those family forest owners, the wood production may not be their first objective. A lot of times they have multiple objectives, whether it's recreation, water, ecosystem services, hunting, all those kind of things.
So our management process here, my brother Scott and I stay in touch fairly closely. We don't necessarily live right next to each other, but we stay in close communication. But we rely very heavily on a consulting forester that has worked with us for many years, and we also rely over the years on other professionals, University of Kentucky, in our case, the extension professionals that are there. We rely on other professionals in NRCS, the Division of Forestry here in Kentucky, other state and federal agencies. We lean on them occasionally for advice.
The importance of white oak across the entire supply chain in the forest products industry is clear, right? The people at the end of the supply chain are the beneficiaries of the finished product. All of the people in between are the folks manipulating that forest product into what it is. But it all starts with the landowner. Without landowners who are managing their land appropriately for white oak, the whole rest of that chain breaks down. And so the work that the White Oak Initiative is doing is working with both private and public landowners to implement those management practices that we have not been implementing over the last several decades to ensure that regeneration happens and we have a future sustainable supply of white oak.
I'm Troy Lovegrove. I'm President and General Manager of Robinson Stave and Cumberland Cooperage. In a nutshell, we make bourbon barrels. We keep about 2 to 3 months of logs on the yard. Those logs go into the stave mill on the log deck and go through a debarker. And we run it through a merchandising saw, which is basically a very large chop saw. So we saw those into stave and heading length. They go into the stave mill and we quarter saw. So we literally, that's what it means. We half it and take the halves and cut it into quarters. And then we cut staves off each side of those quarters. Once it comes out of the resaw, it goes through a system of scanning and x-rays, and we program in the optimum stave we want and where to ignore defects, et cetera. And it gets the maximum yield out of that piece of wood and cuts it into a stave. And then we have a parallel heading line that does the same thing, but by hand. Once it gets to there and it's stacked, we put it on the yard and air dry. For bourbon flavor, we want to be 6 months or more. So we don't see those staves out of the stave mill for about 7 months. And they go out of the stave yard and they go into a dry kiln for 7 to 10 days. In the cooperage, you have a barrel line, so you support it with a stave line, a heading line, and steel line. So those are the 3 supports. They turn the raw wood into staves. Of course, the heading turns heading into heads. And then steel, we take split steel and turn it into bands. And then the barrel line basically assembles the barrel. Puts it together, puts all the headbands on it, char it, of course, put the heads in it, and then we do a final inspection after driving the hoops on, check it for leaks, and then put it on truck.
The relationship between wood that we use to produce our barrels is one of the most critical items of our taste profile of whiskey and bourbon specifically. The way that whiskey interacts with the wood changes with the seasons in Kentucky. We target certain flavor profiles, based on how the interaction of that whiskey is with the wood in the environments that we have. We've got warehouses with multiple floors. We heat our warehouses. And so what that does is it allows us to extract those flavors depending on how long we want it to age and all the different variables that we have, because we have a lot of different whiskeys. That interaction with the wood is critically important for the quality of our whiskey.
When we think about the white oak, we see it in just about every aspect of our life, ranging from hardwood flooring to cabinetry to the picture frames hanging on the wall, railroad ties, and of course, in the barrels that we age our favorite spirits in. Partners with the White Oak Initiative all bring their different perspective and their different strengths to the table. By bringing an organization like Keeping Forests in, by bringing the spirits industry in, by bringing trade associations in, we're able to leverage all of our resources towards this one common goal of sustainable white oak for the future. What we're most excited about right now is the opportunities in our southern forest to regenerate white oak. I mean, good forest management is part of the culture of the South. We have real opportunities here to address some land use changes before they change. Working with our friends in the South is only going to benefit all of us across the entire country when it comes to forest management.
Keeping Forests exists to catalyze markets for southern forest landowners, many of whom are facing economic challenges to keep their forests as forests. We partner with organizations like the White Oak Initiative, who know that landowners are the key to forest conservation. The connection between Bourbon and forest is important because it elevates the story of the need for active forest management. And not only active forest management, but a sustainable supply chain for all of the forest products that come from southern forests. When you pick up a glass of bourbon, you're supporting the legacy of landowners who have planted, harvested, and regenerated forests for hundreds of years. If we want that legacy of regenerative forestry to continue, it will take a multi-sector collaboration dedicated to finding solutions that put landowners at the center of conservation. I'm Laura Calandrella.
I'm Scott Taylor.
I'm Jeff Stringer.
I'm Steve Taylor.
I'm Harlan Wheatley.
I'm Troy Lovegrove.
I'm Jason Meyer with the White Oak Initiative, and we're working hard to keep forests as forests.
And so this sort of brings me to the end of my talk, but I'll wrap up. And I think it's actually I did see the question in the Q&A. I think it's actually a really lovely way to bring this presentation to a close by answering this question. So what does this have to do with Open Canopy? Where does Open Canopy fit in? Well, a few things there. With our emerging markets, with our forest and water platform that we're creating, we are absolutely going to be working with land managers, consulting foresters, whatever organizations really are around some of our pilot sites that we will be testing into the future. We have more pilot sites that are coming online. Longleaf Alliance is another one that we are partnering with, the state of Tennessee, TVA, right? So it could be Open Canopy as well. Just depends on the location, on wherever we are with this particular pilot site. But really the idea there is we'll need the management practices that you all are already working on and working toward, right? Those management practices are going to have to be, I would imagine, this is Laura's, like I said, we get to sort of be the test bed for things. I would imagine that those may be something that the management practices are going to be the thing that lead to whatever it is that corporations are buying, right? So, and those management practices we need to understand. We can also be the translator back to land managers or those that are working with landowners about the different management practices that could lead to higher investments. So that's sort of where we fit in as the broker and you fit in as the broker. With the Southern Forest products, something I didn't really mention, but I also think that the video that we just saw is important. So within Southern Forest products, the strategy, and even within the branding effort, one of the things that we're doing is trying to position innovation in the South. So that's part of the brand of Southern Forest and Southern Forest products. And so innovation, what we're looking for is we're very, very specifically focused on innovations that come from low value wood. And obviously, how do we create Open Canopy? Is we have markets for landowners, right? That aren't just managing you can manage for white oak for 80 years, but you have to have these active management practices. You have to have clear cuts, right, for canopy. But what do you do with that material? And so there, as we brand and as we start to focus on innovation and driving innovation, again, we're not the ones that are we're not working directly on the management practices, but we understand and we need the input of our partners about what's important to understand how to shape our strategies. And then I think this Forest Champions and Leaders, that was very specifically developed to talk about the supply chain for a specific event that I was at. However, this is also a video that I can sit down with people who understand bourbon, And now here's the conversation to the opening for the conversation to say, okay, but exactly what the conversation that I just had with you, but what about all of the other materials? Like, how do you think you manage for white oak in a healthy way? We can start to have a management conversation that is, and a markets conversation that they might not have understood before. So you kind of fit in a lot of different places. We have a unique role in the community, and we like that unique role. We really try to stay in our lane, but we are hugely collaborative, and everything that you've seen before you today has been driven by our partners and extensive conversations, extensive strategy development with our partners. So I'm proud of that. I'm proud that that's sort of the legacy that we have, the reputation that we have, and also that we get to do cool things like this on webinars and engage with you all, so that I'm constantly hearing what's important and how to integrate you into some of these solutions. So with that,
I hope I didn't accidentally kick you off there, Laura. I think you just stopped sharing.
Oh no, I just stopped sharing.
Okay, good. You hit it right at the same time I turned my camera on. I see Judy has a question, but I want to jump in and ask a question too. I think hitting on the market for low value wood is obviously huge to probably everyone on this call. Yeah, I mean, in addition to just markets, period, and mills, period. But not only me, but a lot of us spend a lot of time trying to think how we can contribute to increasing markets, bringing back mills. So my question is, how do conservation organizations, what can we do to help create new markets, improve markets, bring back mills? How do we help with that?
Well, so I mean, my selfish answer is like partner with us so that we and I think it might even go to Judy's question about elaborating on pilot sites. I think you're focused on the thing that you should be focused on, right? You're focused on the conservation and on land management and on working with landowners. I do think that there's an important, but there's also the more direct line, right? I think goes back to what I was saying about trusted leaders. You might be the trusted leader in your community, right? You're the whoever is closest to the ground, generally, and has the ear of stakeholders. And those stakeholders don't just have to be landowners. It could be a wide variety of people. That I think that's really important. I also, going back to where I started with EJ's video, so we have 8 values that we uphold as a partnership. You've seen some of them mentioned throughout this presentation without knowing them, but it's really important for you all to be the representatives to people who care about biodiversity but think that cutting trees is bad, right? So how you have a way to outreach to a constituency that doesn't maybe necessarily understand working forests. So that's a huge leadership role and that's why that Forest Champions and Leaders strategy emerged from our systems mapping exercise, was because we need different voices talking about working forests and markets. I'm a conservation biologist, just so you know. Never in my wild, and then I have my master's in development studies, which is like kind of economic development, but mixed with natural resources. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that I would be running a nonprofit, number one, and one that was focused on working forests and forest markets. I kind of had hints of it throughout my career. I mean, pretty much since the beginning as a conservation biologist, I was always working at the intersection of how do we help communities conserve their natural resources, manage their natural resources, and connect them to profit. I mean, essentially, because I was doing a lot of work overseas. But going back to you all, I think your role as leaders and also engaging with, when, let's say, I don't know, I'll use TNC as an example. TNC has a lot of has a lot of corporate partners, but like I'll use Longleaf Alliance because that's better. And there's been a lot of longleaf planting. Bezos invested however much he invested in longleaf planting. Everybody wants to plant trees, but we need to start talking about regeneration as well. And we need to start talking about harvest and start to make that part of the conversation. So that was a long-winded answer and hopefully touched on a few things. Judy, elaborate on our pilot sites. Okay. Yep. So we We are continuing our work in South Carolina. So there we sort of wrapped the first phase of our work in South Carolina. We are looking, and that was in the Saluda River Basin, so sort of near Greenville-ish area, Greenville, South Carolina. The next step for us is to do a corporate market validation study. We need to understand what are corporations willing to pay for, and how do we start to frame that. And then right now we do have a set of characteristics, some which are just purely opportunistic. For example, we may be shifting in South Carolina to the Georgia-South Carolina border because DOE just put in a massive data, or is going to put in a massive data center on Forest Service land. And there's several corporations that are circling around that. So that's a little bit more opportunistic, but we're also looking at water. We are testing, watersheds where there might be high rates of conversion versus watersheds where we might have more of an opportunity. Characteristics, for example, of like the demographics of certain pilot sites. But right now on our radar, we did another pilot study in Mobile Bay early before the South Carolina one. So Mobile Bay, somewhere in Texas, somewhere in Tennessee, somewhere in the Southern Apps. But a lot of that too is who are our partners, because we don't run projects on the ground. So we'll need actual partners like we had in South Carolina with the South Carolina Forestry Commission, to be connecting us to on the ground resources, including landowners and corporations. We can do a little bit of the heavy lifting on the corporation side of things, but it's really the landowner piece and getting an understanding of the qualities that would cause them to want to participate, because that's the other piece of the equation that's really hard, is getting landowners to participate and what is going to incentivize them. So those are a few of the areas that we are looking at. Hopefully that answered your question. Any insight on how receptive an industry is to open canopy management? Is there a growing nod that industry can play their part while achieving their goals? So what I want to be clear on is, are we talking about forest industry? Is that what I'm guessing that's because when I say industry, I mean forest industry, but because I've also been talking about corporations, I'm not sure. So I will answer it as though we're talking about forest industry. And I have so many questions. I really wish I could interact with you. So REIT, TIMO, large corporations. I mean, we have several REITs, TIMOs, and large corporations that are part of the Keeping Forest Network. And I guess the answer is it depends on who you're talking to, right? So one of my board members has a TIMO REIT, Conservation Resources. He helped to write the regenerative forestry standards. So if you're familiar with regenerative agriculture, and he was the first in the country to be implementing that. And so regenerative agriculture has a lot to do with soil health, right? And it has a lot to do with regeneration, with open canopy. You might have longer terms of growth to bring things to markets for TIMOs and REITs. But from an investor standpoint, right, you're getting higher quality product in the end. He was just at the London Stock Exchange giving a talk on regenerative forestry. So I would say absolutely. Georgia Pacific is also part of Keeping Forests, right? And all of the big industry, forest industry, International Paper. We have big mills. We have a lot of industry engaging. So the long answer to that question is yes, absolutely. They're very receptive. It's smart business. It's smart business, not just good conservation management.
I'm going to follow up on that. And you've probably already touched on this some, but probably part of the answer is we're still figuring it out. But how do we get consumers to buy into these sort of branding and labeling initiatives and to really push on industry?
So I don't think it's pushing on industry. First of all, I would say it's pushing on it's on consumer brands, right? And it's on consumer brands. So I think about so that's why I'm shifting a little bit of my language. I can talk about industry, but I really do think it's that my clothing gets made out of fiber, right? Out of fiber that a pharmaceutical industry starts using more low value product that comes from forests, right? So that's the so I think it's consumers and consumer facing brands, and what our branding initiative is meant to be more of a business to business branding initiative. But I think it's a lot of storytelling, which is again why we're doing the whole forest champions and leaders. We need to shift this. We need to shift the conversation. The conversation that I was having earlier about World Cup and framing around World Cup, you know, the creative team was asking me, like, what do you want people to understand? First, I want them to understand to save a forest, use it. So that's number one. Second, I want them to understand that the Southeast is a hugely productive forest, and that cutting trees and regenerating trees here is part of our history, part of our legacy. I kind of want people to think, when they think about stopping deforestation in the rainforest, and when we think of rainforest, what rainforest do we think about? There's one, right? There's a lot of rainforests, but we think about the Amazon, right? So I want that kind of language to come in, but to save a forest, use it, right? So we have to start shifting these huge marketing challenges that we have. There's a lot of, in an effort to be simplistic over time, there's a lot of false narratives that we've created that aren't true across the board. Like nature has its own unique, I don't need to tell you this, but nature has its own unique ecosystems doing different things for different reasons.
I love hearing someone else have to say it. So.
Right. Well, Smokey Bear was very successful, right? And
too successful.
He was too successful. So we're having to like rewind our pattern. So it's
and that was, I guess, part of my question. And I want to keep this brief because Mike always asks good questions, so I want to leave some time for his question. But yeah, it's we're almost trying to change the paradigm from save the forest to like, well, one, save the actual forest, not just the trees, right? Which are a part of the forest.
right.
But how do we like tie biodiversity into that and get people to realize that by cutting trees, you're saving systems and biodiversity and your ecosystem services and everything else? And we can talk about this later, but that's a fascinating question to me, to make people realize that it's not that we don't want to cut trees, it's that we want to manage the system and the benefits you get from managing the system.
Right. So we do have to start talking about active management, working forest. We did, and you can find it somewhere on our website. We did a whole public opinion research study during the pandemic of how do we talk about southern forests. And so people were locked in their houses and were happy to get on focus groups and qual boards. And so that resource is somewhere, or I can pass it along if you want to send it out. But I mean, again, I think I think there's a huge opportunity with the recreation community, right? To be able to, they're out in the forest, they get it, they understand it, but we have to be reaching people where their values are, because they might not care about canopy, right? But they care about recreation, right? And so and we stay very positive and optimistic and forward looking. And the truth of the narrative is, in the Southeast, these are private lands. These are private forests. It's not, right? So these have high risk of going away. So I will look at Mike's question. 78% of wood furniture sold in America was imported in 2019. People will buy what is available from retailers. Retailers are the bottleneck for open canopy commercial forest management. Yes. Mills will cut it if there is a manufacturer to buy the lumber for furniture. Loggers will cut it okay, yes. You're describing the supply chain, yes. And so is this reasonable? I'm not sure what this is that is reasonable, but yes, I think there is it goes back to why why we're looking at the Southern Forest Products brand as a whole, and the branding Southern Forest is because, and if I can show that diagram again, I also I can provide the link to this presentation, and there's a PDF as well. But in geographic branding, so Napa Valley just didn't like wake up one day and said, we're just going to have great quality wine and start marketing it. There is a whole way that you have to start to push on consumers through the marketing, through what you all think of traditionally as branding, but then also being able to work with what we call anchor brands. So it might be a Home Depot. I live in Atlanta. And so, we have a lot of big corporations and industry that are based here, but you do need anchor brands to start to push through those bottlenecks, but also that they can be huge in telling the story, right? So there's opportunities. So going back to your question, Kyle, about conservation organizations, when a Home Depot says they want to come and give money to you, right, to Open Canopy, to do something specific, how do you use that moment in time to help not just say, yes, thank you for this money, I'm going to go do exactly this. Like, you use that moment in time. Have you thought about doing X, Y, or Z? Do you know that if we did this kind of thing instead of planting trees, right? Like, so those are the opportunities too. So it's a combination of things, Mike. I think it's a combination of pushing on consumers, right? But also finding those anchor brands, which, like, this is why Keeping Forest exists, is because you guys don't have the time, right, to be like shifting whole markets, but you absolutely need to be part of the conversation. And you also have a lot of, you have a lot of opportunity in a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, to be having the new conversations. I call them the right conversations, the new conversations.
I think we hit the questions. Laura, this was great. I really love the way you guys are thinking about addressing this problem that's really complex, because we need it answered. So great job. And just again, thank you.
Thanks for having me. Since there are a few minutes, I can go ahead and drop the link to this presentation in the chat if anybody cares
That
to
would
have
be
it.
awesome.
And then you don't have to think about it. You don't have to think
Yeah, I
about
think you mentioned another publication about influencing markets that you
Yeah.
were going to provide.
I can. It's not, I can't do it that quickly.
Okay.
So
No,
I'll
there's no
be happy
hyperlink to it. Gotcha.
to. But I am dropping this. Oh, there is no chat, is there?
No, there's not.
Never
You
mind.
might be able to ask yourself a question though.
We'll just handle it offline.
Okay, you can send it to me and I'll be happy to send it out.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you so much for having me. It was great to spend time with you. I'm sorry I missed the conference, and hopefully get a chance to see you face to face some other time.
Absolutely. We'll look forward to it. And thank you to everybody that joined. Be on the lookout in the coming weeks for some emails, registration opportunities for our next webinar on February 6th. Please fill out that project reporting form. And finally, if you have ideas for future webinars you'd like to see addressed, please shoot them to me or anyone involved with Open Canopy. Thank you very much, and we'll go ahead and end it here.